1, 2, 3. Testing. 1, 2, 3. Testing. Testes. 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 1, 2, 3. Testes. Testes. Dan, are you there? Testes. 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 You know, anxiety is all about what we can't see. I want you to remember this. Fear is the unknown, and the unknown is always worse than reality, unless it's not. But usually, the unknown is worse. Take the debate this week. Lane from Seaham sent this to us. Take the debate this week in Great Britain for leader of the Conservative Party. This was between Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak. It was a televised debate, and the moderator kind of fainted in the middle of this. Watch.
If he succeeds in Ukraine, he's not going to stop there. He's going to challenge the freedom and democracy. Oh my God.
All right. All right. So the moderator was fine, but you can't tell that she's fine from the video. You just hear the collapse, the slapstick. You see Liz Truss's reaction, and then the debate suddenly ends, and you think it's a lot worse than it actually is. Had you seen the moderator, Kate McCann, on the floor, you would see that she's perfectly fine, but we didn't get to see that. So it was theater of the mind, and theater of the mind enhances. It makes things bigger than it really is because it's your imagination. That's what anxiety is. That's what fear is. It's theater of the mind, as opposed to my podcast, which is theater of the ass. President Joe Biden talked today with Chinese leader Xi Jinping over the phone. The White House did not say whether or not Biden and Xi discussed Speaker Nancy Pelosi's planned trip to Taiwan, which Xi is warning her not to take. Xi has specifically told her not to go to Taiwan. I did read a transcript, however, of the conversation between Biden and Xi, and Biden said Xi is wrong. Then Xi said, who is wrong? And Biden said, no, who is fine? It's Xi who's wrong. And Xi said, is Pelosi Xi? And Biden said to Xi, no, you're Xi. And Xi said, I'm Pelosi. And Biden said, okay. Well, anyway, that's what Xi said. You think anybody over at the White House is talking about Chinese policy and says, that's what Xi said? Biden's poll numbers are not good, and candidates heading into the midterms are distancing themselves from him. Congressman Tim Ryan is Ohio's Democratic nominee for Senate. It's a Republican seat vacated by Rob Portman, so the Republicans could lose this seat, especially since they're running lightweight J.D. Vance. He's a very problematic candidate, hillbilly elegy guy, not too good. So Republicans could lose this seat, and the Dems may not need Joe Manchin. I'll talk about Manchin in a second. And so Congressman Tim Ryan is trying to win. He's distancing himself from Joe Biden. Biden gave a speech in Ohio earlier this month. Congressman Ryan was not in attendance. He was asked this week whether or not Biden should run for a second term, and Ryan refused to answer that question. The squads, Cori Bush, Congresswoman Cori Bush, she's a freshman. We love Cori Bush, and she has a primary coming up in Missouri on August 2nd. In the Democratic Party, Cori Bush is being challenged by AIPAC. She's being challenged by a 34-year-old state senator named Steve Roberts. Now, as I said, Cori Bush is a freshman. She was the one last year who reminded Pelosi and Biden that the eviction moratorium was about to expire. I actually think it was this year. She reminded Pelosi and Biden that the eviction moratorium was about to expire, and she chose to live on the Capitol steps for a night or two to draw attention to that. She was opposed to funding the war in Ukraine, and she was opposed to funding Israel's Iron Dome. So she is facing stiff opposition in next Tuesday's primary from this 34-year-old state senator named Steve Roberts, who faces multiple accusations of sexual harassment and assault. Well, this week, Cori Bush was asked whether or not she thinks President Biden should run for a second term.
Do you want to see Joe Biden run for a second term?
She's got to go.
Yeah,
that's an easy question. It's not going to take long. Do you want to see Joe Biden run?
I don't want to answer that question because I don't want to answer that question.
Okay.
He's the president and he has the right to run for a second term. Absolutely. I'd rather you not do that.
Okay, so you got like 2 minutes to get started.
Yeah, I know. I got to get to the.
Well, thanks very much.
The other thing.
I think she would say that whether or not Biden was doing well in the polls, I think she has that much principle and she's that opposed to most of what Joe Biden is doing, as am I. So has Joe Biden hit rock bottom? His COVID is over, and Joe Biden this week, he went back to the White House.
And now I get to go back to the Oval Office. Thank you all very much.
Not a fan of the guy. Wrong guy for the moment. But can he turn it around for the Dems in November? So Biden today is calling it the Inflation Reduction Act, and Joe Manchin is on board. Cue Kyrsten Sinema, it's your turn to kill this. On Wednesday, Washington was thrown back on its heels when Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer announced that permanent thorn in the Democratic Party's side, Joe Manchin, was on board a bill that would allow the U.S. government to negotiate drug prices for Medicare, impose a 15% corporate minimum tax, as well as tackle climate change. According to a one-page summary of this bill, it would cut greenhouse gases by as much as 40% in 8 years. The agreement would provide a $4,000 tax credit for consumers to buy used electric vehicles and up to a $7,500 tax credit for Americans to buy brand new electric vehicles. Those tax credits would not be available to anyone earning more than $150,000 a year. To please Manchin, the agreement would open up Alaska and the Gulf of Mexico for drilling. Manufacturers of solar panels, wind turbines, and batteries would receive a $30 billion tax credit, and an additional $10 billion tax credit would be forked over to factories that produce the equipment for alternative energy. There is a $1.5 billion incentive for oil companies to slash methane emissions. $27 billion would go into what they're calling a green bank that would lend money to people who are starting green energy businesses. Senator Kyrsten Sinema, Democrat from Arizona, did not attend today's meeting of the Democratic caucus, so she may torpedo the bill instead of Manchin. So I'm not a fan of Joe Biden's. Politically speaking, I'm not talking about whether or not this new bill comes even close to solving the climate catastrophe, but from a political standpoint, just about winning in November, because this is election season, the midterms are only months away. What do the Democrats have to run on? And whether or not you like this, it is something. The bipartisan infrastructure bill from last year, as long as you don't tell the American people that the bipartisan infrastructure bill was socialism for the rich, that's also something the Democrats could run on. COVID, still bad, but politically, nobody is wearing a mask. So a lot of people, voters, don't seem to think we're as screwed as we were last year. I'm not saying we shouldn't be terrified of COVID. I'm saying the American people foolishly think this COVID is under control. So Biden And the Democrats should get credit for that. And they have done a better job than Trump did on masks and getting the vaccine rolled out. So you have to give the Democrats credit for COVID appearing to be milder. You also have Joe Biden pulling out of Afghanistan. Unfortunately, he went into Ukraine. You know, there's the same amount of money we spent each year on Afghanistan, we're now spending in Ukraine. But we don't have soldiers in Ukraine. Politically speaking, that benefits the Democrats. You also have the January 6th committee succeeding in bringing down Donald Trump's poll numbers. And that's good for the Democrats because Donald Trump is the Republican Party. We also have a Supreme Court that just got rid of Roe v. Wade. That is going to get women to the polls in November, and they're not voting for Republicans. The Democrats are succeeding in forcing the Republican hand. The Democrats, Nancy Pelosi, are succeeding by bringing up several floor votes, which I'll talk about in a second. She is forcing the Republicans to admit what they really believe. They're against same-sex marriage. 70% of Americans support same-sex marriage. But Republicans have made it very clear that they want same-sex marriage on the chopping block. That's what Clarence Thomas has said. The Republicans do not support same-sex marriage, nor do they support the use of contraception. Pelosi forced these votes where by November, anyone paying attention and planning to vote will realize that abortion, the right to contraception, maybe even same-sex marriage will not be codified into law because of Republicans. Maybe same-sex marriage. Those floor votes in the House revealed that there were some Republicans who were willing to support same-sex marriage. We'll see. We'll see. Biden just got the Bipartisan Safer Communities Act passed, signed. It's the law. It purports to protect America's children from the threat of gun violence. Obviously, it's not enough, but it's something to run on. There are some executive orders on the environment, coal, for example. Some of them have been overturned by the court. We also have a labor-friendly National Labor Relations Board. It's undeniable. You cannot deny that Biden has appointed a worker-friendly National Labor Relations Board, and it's sparking the beginning of a labor movement in this country. We're seeing it at Amazon, we're seeing it at Starbucks. Granted, Amazon and Starbucks refused to recognize those unions. I talked about Chipotle in Maine. A Chipotle restaurant in Maine voted to go union, so they closed the store. So it's not enough, obviously. But we're seeing a record rise of applications to the NLRB to form unions. Again, it's not even close to good, but it's a start. It's better than the alternative. He's also appointed consumer-friendly attorneys to the Federal Trade Commission. This is not good enough by any stretch of the imagination, but politically speaking, it could be, especially with this new bill that Manchin is signing on for, if Biden can pass that, it's starting to shape up as a record for Democrats to run on in November and maybe pick up some seats in the Senate, maybe not lose the House, because the Democrats are benefiting from the Republicans being run by lunatics. We see from the January 6 hearings how they will not badmouth the insurrection. They're in love with guns. They are now espousing this belief, and I'm going to talk about this later on. The Republicans are openly saying that we need guns for an insurrection. This is what they're saying in Congress openly. They're saying that the Second Amendment is there to prevent an overly intrusive government. I talked about this on Monday's show. That is how Dr. Oz is running for Senate in Pennsylvania. I'm pro-gun because guns allow us to keep our government in check. So the Republicans have revealed their hand and shown themselves to be truly, truly dangerous. Joe Biden was quarantining during his COVID, but he had enough time to deliver a speech to law enforcement officers. And he summed up the difference. He did it on video. He summed up the difference between Democrats and Republicans going into the midterms. He spelled out that if you're pro-insurrection, you can't be pro-cop.
You'd never forget that. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-cop. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-democracy. You can't be pro-insurrection and pro-American. There can be no greater responsibility than to do all we can to ensure the safety of our families, our children, our community, our nation, and our law enforcement officers.
It is, for political reasons, it is the responsibility of the Democrats to point out that the Republicans are not pro-law and order. They are not pro-law and order, and they're not pro-cops. The same way they wave the flag and they're not pro-American. This is something to run on. These guns are killing cops. In contrast to Joe Biden, look how hollow Donald Trump sounded earlier this week when he spoke before the America First Committee in Washington, D.C. This is Donald Trump. And look how hollow this sounds now.
The radical left's anti-police narrative is a total lie. Let's call it the big lie. Have you ever heard that expression before?
They're applauding the big lie. You know, Joseph Goebbels, the big lie. America First. The name America First harkens back to the isolationists, the pro-Hitler isolationists, Lindbergh, you know, in the late 30s. And they're applauding the big lie, Joseph Goebbels' big lie.
The radical left's anti-police narrative is a total lie. Let's call it the big lie. Have you ever heard that expression before? The big lie. That's why next year our new majorities in Congress should vote to strengthen qualified immunity and other protections for our great police officers. They have to become our heroes. They are mine, but some people, they don't feel that way. They're going to have to feel that way if we're going to have a great country and a safe country.
Yeah, the police are his heroes. That's why it took him 3 hours during the riot to call off his attack dogs. So what are the Republicans offering for the future? A world of gun violence and martial law. This is what the GOP stands for. They want a terrified nation of Americans shooting at other Americans and ultimately relying on law enforcement, relying on a strong man to restore order. Here's some more Trump from earlier this week. Notice he's on this next clip, he starts talking about Chicago's West Side, the problem of gun violence, black on black gun violence on Chicago's West Side. The Republicans love talking about this. They love talking about Chicago. And he is now using gun violence in Chicago as an excuse to declare martial law. This is right out of the fascist playbook. It's ethno-nationalism, right? The threat of black people with guns and the need to rely on our military to restore order. Take a listen to this. This is fascism.
Another 60 people were shot. Think of this. It's not even possible. Were shot in Chicago over the weekend. In Afghanistan, for 18 months, not one of our soldiers was killed. And
because Pompeo made a deal with the Taliban, we will keep our soldiers behind in the green zone. We won't step foot into Kabul if you agree not to shoot any of our soldiers. That's what happened. That's why so few soldiers were killed in Afghanistan.
Of people shot in Chicago over the weekend. Think of it. And he died, by the way. Many died. When that many are shot, a lot are going to die. And this is constant in Chicago. And this cannot go on anymore. Every other approach has been considered and tried. And they've tried the weak approach. They've been trying it for years.
Every approach has been tried except national gun laws. We've tried every approach except removing the cause of gun violence, guns.
And really trying it over the last couple of years, and it's not working. It's time to go a different direction. And only one option remains. The next president needs to send the National Guard to the most dangerous neighborhoods in Chicago until safety can be successfully restored, which can happen very, very quickly.
Send in the National Guard into Chicago's West Side to rein in the blacks. Applause. No National Guard for the Capitol when white nationalists are trying to hang Nancy Pelosi. Somehow there was no need for the National Guard there. No order for the National Guard. He lied. And Hannity lies and said that on January 5th, Trump signed off on 20,000 National Guard being available to the Capitol. That's a lie. The defense secretary who replaced Esper said it was a lie. The lies, it doesn't matter. The big lie that they applauded, the big lie. Well, yeah, the House Oversight Committee on Wednesday held hearings on gun violence. Gun manufacturers were called to testify. Here is Congresswoman Katie Porter. She had a very simple question for the manufacturer of Ruger, the CEO for Ruger Firearms, CEO Christopher Killoy. Ruger makes AR-15s and assault weapons. Here is Katie Porter.
This is my cell phone. Mr. Killoy, it scans my fingerprint each time I go to unlock it. Is this a weapon?
No, ma'am.
Can this fire bullets that shred people's vital organs? This phone?
No, Congresswoman, it can't.
Then why should this device require more steps to operate than your company's firearms, which have been used in accidental shootings, mass shootings, and homicides?
Congresswoman, respectfully, your cell phone doesn't generate internal pressures of upwards of 60,000 pounds per square inch.
Which should make it even harder for you to use than your cell phone. Marty Daniel makes the AR-15 that was used in the Uvalde shooting. He owns Daniel Defense. He has a history of advertising, marketing to children. In fact, his marketing combines the love of Christianity with the love for children. He uses imagery of good Christian values, good Christian families, placing AR-15s in the laps of their children. I'm not making this up. They are marketing to children. Now, marketing to children comes under the jurisdiction of the federal government. The Federal Trade Commission does not allow cigarette companies, for example, to market to children. Marketing to children is not protected by the First Amendment. Gun companies, especially gun companies like Marty Daniel, who does business with the federal government, they can be forced either through enforcement of agency law, like the Federal Trade Commission, or through something called disbarment. That's where the federal government says, we don't like your business practices, so no more government contracts for you. Okay? Federal government can dictate how Daniel Defense advertises to children. I talked about this after the Uvalde shooting. It's very easy for Joe Biden to simply say Daniel Defense doesn't get to make guns for our Pentagon because they're marketing to children we don't approve. Our government has every right to dictate the terms of our contracts. Well, CEO of Daniel Defense, Marty Daniel, was asked about marketing to children by Congresswoman and Democrat Brenda Washington, who I believe she is from, I think she's from Michigan.
Ask Mr. Daniel, why did your company remove this post from Twitter? Sir?
Congresswoman, this ad is about parents teaching children gun safety.
Why did you take it down, sir?
Teaching them what a gun is.
Why did you take it down, sir? Answer the question, please.
Yes, ma'am. We took this ad down, although it had a good message. We took it down because children had just been killed, and we didn't think it was appropriate.
It wasn't appropriate. Isn't that ironic that you, who used this picture on social media, personally as a company, decided it was inappropriate?
Christopher Kilroy, that's a good name for the CEO of Sturm Ruger, Kilroy. He was asked by Congresswoman AOC about how and why Sturm Ruger markets its firearms to white supremacists like the Oath Keepers, the Proud Boys, and the Boogaloo Boys. Here's AOC.
Up another photo. As a member of the foundation that you're in, right here, Palmetto State Armory has used imagery clearly designed to appeal to the FBI-identified far-right domestic terror threat, Boogaloo Boys, with products such as this AK-47 style pistol designed in the same floral pattern that is often used by these group members to identify one another. Mr. Kilroy, as a board member of the NSSF, do you condemn marketing firearms to identified extremist groups such as the Proud Boys or Oath Keepers or Boogaloo Boys? Yes or no? Do you condemn your industry explicitly marketing materials to domestic terror threats?
Congresswoman, the National Shooting Sports Foundation does not control individual member companies.
But this is a member of your foundation, Mr. Kilroy.
But I take exception to the fact that, I can assure you we do not tolerate racism or white supremacy.
Do you condemn marketing these materials? Do you condemn marketing these materials to Proud Boys, Oath Keepers, or Boogaloo Boys? That's all, Madam Chair. It's just a yes or no.
Congresswoman,
answer the question.
I didn't know that was, I had never seen that ad before, and I didn't realize that's what it was tied to. And I'm not an expert in that field.
So you don't have an answer.
The CEO of Sturm Ruger doesn't pay attention to the advertising of his weapons to white nationalists and can't really bring himself to condemn that advertising. There's money to be made in ethno-nationalism. Well, then it was Marty Daniel's turn in the barrel. Marty Daniel, the CEO of Daniel Defense, who does millions and millions of dollars worth of business with our Pentagon every year. It was his turn in the barrel when Congresswoman AOC asked him about his company marketing to white nationalists.
It's on. Okay, perfect. Mr. Daniel, you are CEO of firearm manufacturer Daniel Defense. This photograph is from an advertisement featured for your company. Do you know, I'd like to draw your attention to that red tattoo featured in your company's advertisement. Do you know what that tattoo is? Mr. Daniels?
Madam Congresswoman, I'm not sure this is our ad. Can you show the whole ad? Is this our ad or someone else?
Yes, this is your ad, Mr. Daniel. This is an advertisement for your company, Daniel Defense.
Why brand name, not in the photo.
No
ma'am.
worries, no worries. So this is featured prominently in your advertisement, that tattoo. You've indicated that you don't know what it is, but Ms. Sampson, as an expert in this area, can you briefly tell us what that tattoo is?
That's a fall knot, and it's a symbol that has been increasingly embraced by white supremacists.
So, Mr. Daniel, you may or may not know, but your company's advertisement prominently displays iconography associated with white supremacist movements. You can also find it in this other photo that I will be pulling up right now. Right there from January 6th, you can see the fall knot right there on this gentleman's chest. Mr. Daniel, yes or no, are you aware that your advertising department uses imagery affiliated with white supremacist movements in its marketing materials?
No, ma'am, I don't
Okay,
think
no,
we do.
reclaiming my time. Thank you. I apologize. I just have to move a bit quick.
See why the right wing hates AOC? Was this covered yesterday? I don't watch television news. Were these hearings covered on the news last night? I can't think of a more important story that happened yesterday. Maybe Joe Manchin getting on board the inflation bill, but this sure seems like it's news. Was it covered? I'd like to know. Congresswoman Shontel Brown, this is yesterday. Congresswoman Shontel Brown represents Cleveland, Ohio, and Shaker Heights, and should have been Nina Turner representing Cleveland and Shaker Heights, but AIPAC and cryptocurrency billionaires pushed Shontel Brown to victory. Here she is grilling Marty Daniel from Daniel Defense, the maker of the AR-15 that was used in Uvalde. Here is Shontel Brown. No Nina Turner.
The leading cause of child deaths in the country, and a teenager used one of your weapons to kill 19 children just a month ago.
Ma'am, you've said a lot. What was the question there?
Do you believe it is appropriate to market guns in such a manner, as your advertising has done, when gun deaths are now the leading cause of child deaths in the country, and a teenager used one of your weapons to kill 19 children just a month ago? It's a yes or no question.
This advertisement you're showing is a safety advertisement.
Is it appropriate? It's a yes or no question.
This is an appropriate ad for safety teaching
To advertise,
children.
it's a yes or no. Is that a yes?
This advertisement
Reclaiming
is
my
about
time. Mr. Booth.
That is Congresswoman Shontel Brown, who represents Cleveland, Ohio. And she was grilling Marty Daniel from Daniel Defense, the maker of the AR-15 used in Uvalde, Texas. Congressman Raja Krishnamurti represents the people of Illinois who on July 4th in Highland Park found themselves at the mercy of a rooftop sniper who fired 83 rounds into a July 4th parade, killing 7. That shooter used an AR-15. He bought 5 guns legally, and he used an AR-15 to kill 7 people, the same type of AR-15 that is made by the guy who runs Daniel Defense.
Reads, quote, rooftop ready, even at midnight. Then a smiley face emoji.
So just to be clear here, Congressman Raja Krishnamurti is showing an advertisement that Daniel Defense put on Twitter of a sniper. You're looking through a sniper's scope at a car on the street, and that's how they're marketing AR-15s to consumers, to be a rooftop sniper. It's incredible.
Statement. Mr. Daniel, this is what your tweet says, correct?
Yes, that's correct, sir.
And the tweet shows what appears to be a night vision gun scope trained on a parked car at street level. Mr. Daniel, this tweet is not depicting anyone hunting for wildlife, is it?
No, sir.
And it's not depicting anyone acting in self-defense against someone attacking them, correct?
That remains in the eye of the viewer, sir.
I don't see anyone attacking somebody here. Mr. Busey, can you verify that? Nobody appears to be attacking the person who's supposedly operating this AR-15 or this sniper rifle, correct?
Yes, sir. That appears to be an ad, which in some way glorifies the idea of becoming a sniper with that rifle.
Mr. Daniel, this advertisement appears to depict premeditated violence or murder from a rooftop. As you know, the Highland Park shooter in Illinois rained down bullets from a rooftop. 8-year-old Cooper Roberts was paralyzed from the waist down when he was shot from a rooftop, Mr. Daniel. 2-year-old Aiden McCarthy was orphaned when both of his parents were murdered when they were shot from a rooftop. Sir, this tweet appears to suggest a planned murder, and I would respectfully ask authorities and law enforcement to see whether this particular advertisement is even legal.
Well, time to talk about the dangerously inferior Congressman Clay Higgins. He's from Louisiana, and the inferior Clay Higgins sits on the Oversight Committee that held hearings. He was there yesterday. The inferior Clay Higgins is a former police officer. He was part of the SWAT team for Opelousas Police in Louisiana. He was known as the Cajun John Wayne for making videos where he referred to gang members as animals, thugs, and heathens. He would go on TV as a SWAT police officer and taunt gang members by saying things like, "What you fellas are is the Virginia Slim Gang, because you're certainly not Marlboro men." A Marlboro man, for people who are under the age of 40, those would be the cowboys who smoked Marlboro and had their lungs removed. But that apparently, to the inferior Clay Higgins, a Marlboro man is superior because why? They're tough. They can't breathe, so they're tough. This is the inferior Congressman Clay Higgins, who came under attack by the ACLU when he was the John Wayne, the Cajun John Wayne. He would go on local television to address a gang down in Louisiana known as the Gremlins. And he went on television and said, "You will be hunted, you will be trapped. And if you raise your weapon to a man like me, we'll return fire with superior fire." He was a showboater, and he loved his guns. The Independent in Louisiana reports that the inferior Clay Higgins, the Cajun John Wayne, eventually had to retire from the SWAT team because an internal review revealed he had a habit of physically assaulting suspects, especially black suspects. Also, he was collecting huge speaking fees that he didn't tell the IRS about. And of course, he was selling swag, as cops are known to do, selling swag. So left with no options, the inferior Clay Higgins ran for office, and he became a congressman from Louisiana. And during yesterday's hearings, the inferior and dangerous Clay Higgins he warned that taking away our assault weapons would end up creating a bloodbath, a civil war between the federal government and people who want to keep their assault weapons. And he said this civil war, this bloodbath, would be the fault of the federal government for enforcing gun laws. I'm going to play this clip. It's long, but this is what we're up against. This is the inferior the inferior Clay Higgins.
Say, does an American citizen have the right to defend their home from armed, violent home invasion? Just yes or no. It's not a trick question.
Yes, sir. I believe that the Supreme Court has established that right.
Yeah, it was well defined 240 years ago, reaffirmed by Article 3 and every sovereign state since. Ms. Sampson, you believe an American citizen, a free American, has a right to defend his home from armed, violent invasion?
With respect, thank you for the question. The things that we're talking about won't prevent.
Well, we're moving past you. Ms. Okafor.
An African-American woman. We're moving past you. No need to talk to you. So Clay Higgins, not a great legal mind, not educated, a police officer. And he says, he'll say Article 3 as though that means anything. That's the Supreme Court. I guarantee he cannot tell us the Bill of Rights, what the Bill of Rights protect. Anyway, does this seem like a healthy guy? Does this seem like a normal guy? He shouldn't be a congressman. He shouldn't be a police officer. He is a nothing. He is a zero.
Say, does an American, reaffirmed by Article 3 and every sovereign state since. Ms. Sampson, you believe an American citizen, a free American, has a right to defend his home from armed, violent invasion?
With respect, thank you for the question. The things that we're talking about won't prevent.
Well, we're moving past you. Ms. Okafor, does an American citizen have the right to defend their home from armed and violent invasion?
Absolutely. Not only is a human right, it's also guaranteed by the Constitution.
Absolutely. What my colleagues are doing, it's unbelievably beyond the pale of anything reasonable or constitutional. Everything we're leading towards here is the seizure of weapons from the homes of law-abiding American citizens that have purchased those weapons legally. You're setting up gunfights in the homes of Americans between Americans responding in the dead of night. When do you think ATF and the FBI comes to a house? In the dead of night. You're setting up gunfights between American citizens defending their homes from dark shadows, clearly armed, coming into our home, onto our porch.
You're setting up a gunfight by enforcing the law. This is insurrectionist talk. He's saying you do not have to obey laws that you personally choose to nullify.
Through our door, you're setting up death. Americans killing Americans over some...
By getting rid of assault weapons, we're setting up death because the crazed gun owners are going to fire at ATF and FBI agents when they come for the guns. We're setting up death. Projection.
That you can define what is a dangerous weapon in the hands of those Americans just living beyond their true right to exercise their own decisions about what type of firearm they legally purchase and own. It's insane what you're pushing. It's not going to end well. Once again, I clarify.
It's not going to end well. It's not even subtle. He's threatening insurrection.
You have majority control, and you're most certainly exercising it, and you can push this bill through by party line vote. But Americans are not going to sit and allow, without responding. Man, people make decisions like that.
So he's saying that people make decisions like that. They have AR-15s. They're going to snap, and start shooting. That's what he's saying.
Circumstances, again, in the dead of night. You're setting up some extreme stuff and you're 100% responsible for it. My colleagues in the Democratic Party, when those gunfights happen, that blood will be on your hands.
Not on the hands of the people who fire weapons at the FBI and the ATF for enforcing an assault weapons ban. It's on the hands of the lawmakers. It's not on the hands of the people who fire the weapons. It's on the hands of the people who are enforcing the law. This is dangerous. This is dangerous shit, and this is what they believe.
Over this political charade of pretending to be able to identify weapons that you from your ivory tower in D.C., you know better. I can define the weapons that Americans shouldn't have the right to own. It's already, we can't buy a tank or howitzer or caliber above 50. We carry light arms and we own them. We own
An
them legally.
AR-15 is not a light arm. It's used in war. In a matter of 90 seconds, you can kill 7 people. That is not a light arm.
We intend to keep them. Ms. Okafor, thank you for being here today, man. Very contentious, this issue in America today, but doesn't have to be. Anyone that would actually read the Constitution that they teach, they would know that this is a rabbit hole there's no escaping from. And ultimately it ends with an American citizen standing to defend his freedom. The only question is, when we have that debate reasonably through Article 1 in the legislative branch, will we have reasonable regulatory effort out of Article 2 in our executive branch? Will it be argued in court, or will it be settled on the front porch of Americans when the FBI and the ATF shows up to seize legally owned weapons from a law-abiding American citizen? That's what you're setting up.
That is really incendiary talk from a United States congressman saying that if you pass a law, an assault weapons ban, which we had in 1994, if you pass this, you, by passing this, are setting up a gunfight between what he calls law-abiding citizens. Well, if you're not giving up your AR-15, you're not a law-abiding citizen. And he's blaming the law. He's saying it's the law that causes people to shoot at the FBI and the ATF. This is a congressman, United States congressman, and an ex-cop. And what is killing cops? Guns. You would think, but the inferior Clay Higgins isn't capable of thought. You would think he, as a former police officer, would want to get these guns off the street. He was threatening violence. I could play that again, but I won't. He was threatening violence. And Congressman Gerald Connolly from Virginia, Democrat, was having no part of it. I talked about Congressman Gerald Connolly on Monday's show. He's warning quite vociferously about Donald Trump's executive order that he signed in, when was it? It was in October. Trump signed an executive order in October of 2020 that would create 4,000 quote unquote shock troops to take over the administrative state. Gerald Connolly, congressman from Virginia, called the inferior Clay Higgins on his rhetoric.
From a law-abiding American citizen. That's what you're setting up. I'm sorry, Ms. Okafor, my time has expired, but my passion has not in defense of the Second Amendment. Madam Chair, I yield.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Conley, is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the chair. Let me just say to my friend from Louisiana, I can match his passion with my own. And we will not be threatened with violence and bloodshed because we want reasonable gun control.
Is the gentleman point?
I will not yield. I will not yield.
Because
It's
I'm
my
not.
time, Madam Chairman. And I'd like the time
I'd ask the
restored.
gentleman
I'd like
to
the time
retract
restored
that
from the
statement.
interruption. You just heard it. Another threat of violence.
Madam Chair, I'd like the word
Madam Chairman, it is my time.
Madam Chair,
you
point
have
of
a
order.
rule on
Point of
that.
order, Madam Chair.
Can
Point
I
of
put
order.
up?
Yeah, I wasn't advocating violence. You have a rewind button if you're listening. Listen to what Clay Higgins said, and you tell me if he wasn't warning of bloodshed if an assault weapons ban is passed. This is reminiscent of what happened in the lead up to the Civil War. I think Andrew Jackson had I think he was the Vice President Calhoun, who resigned and created what was called the nullification crisis, where it was about individual states being allowed to say, I don't like these laws, we're not going to obey them, come and enforce them. And this leads to a civil war. There is a lot of insane talk that's running parallel to the January 6th committee hearings. The insurrection, we talked about this on Monday's show. There is a congressman from Texas named Chip Roy who is an attorney, and he says what a lot of Republicans are thinking, and that is the Second Amendment was put there by our founding fathers to give Americans a choice as to what laws they will obey and what laws they will not obey. It is the insurrectionist theory that every American has a right to take arms against his government. This is insanity. And Congressman Jamie Raskin, former Nader's Raider, he sits on the oversight committee that held hearings yesterday. Did this get reported? I don't know how much, maybe this was front page news. Maybe Lester Holt and Rachel Maddow or Lawrence O'Donnell talk about this yesterday, so maybe I'm wrong. But I can't think of a more important story than how Republicans are reading the Second Amendment, especially with this conservative court. So Jamie Raskin has been brave enough to take on these Republicans who are insisting, mostly in private, but now in public, it's beginning to leak into the public, that the Second Amendment is there to arm the citizens because our founding fathers were in favor of insurrection. Therefore, our founding fathers would have supported what happened on January 6th. This is how insane the Second Amendment debate has gotten. You have Republicans who genuinely believe our founding fathers gave us the Second Amendment so we could take arms against our government if it's truly, if it's overly intrusive. I played this on Monday's show. This would be Dr. Oz, of all people. This is a commercial that he ran.
Other conservatives know that I'm strong on the Second Amendment. Ted Nugent, Rick Perry, President Trump. But our Second Amendment is not just about hunting. It's about our constitutional right to protect ourselves from intruders or an overly intrusive government.
Right. I talked about this on Monday's show. This is what Republican candidates are running on. They don't know the difference between civil disobedience and insurrection. This is what happens when ignorant people get the reins of power. The mentally ill and the ignorant have the reins of power in the Republican Party. This is Jamie Raskin, who drew an important distinction between disobedience and insurrection during yesterday's hearings on gun violence.
My friend, Mr. Roy of Texas, who's by far the most articulate and able defender of this doctrine, concedes that I'm right about the Constitution, but shifts over to talk about the Declaration of Independence, which I cheerfully concede is a revolutionary document, and which explained why, after a long train of abuses and usurpations by the Crown and Parliament, we needed to dissolve the political bands of union with England. But that's the whole point. We are governed by the Constitution, which is positive law, and nowhere does it grant a right of insurrection. It opposes it at every turn. As a matter not of constitutional law, but natural law, people can decide to overthrow their government, but you do that on your own time, at your own risk. The Constitution does not give you the right to destroy the Constitution and the government. And another way to understand this point is to think about nonviolent civil disobedience. Even nonviolent civil disobedience is not protected by our Constitution. Dr. King and SNCC, those people went to jail because they believed in civil rights and were willing to pay the cost. They never claimed that the Constitution gives people the right to break the law, much less take up arms against the government. So the facts are very clear. The Second Amendment does not give you the right to engage in insurrection. They should stop saying that. And Justice Scalia was extremely clear in the Heller decision that the Second Amendment does not give an unlimited right to carry whatever guns you want, wherever you want. I yield back to you.
That was Jamie Raskin during yesterday's oversight hearings on gun violence. I'm going to replay what Chip Roy, a lawyer, said, I think it was in June, defending the Second Amendment and why we need it.
Why do we have guns? Why do we have the Second Amendment? Is it to hunt? Sure. Self-defense? That's even more important. The fact is, you read the founders, Federalist 46, James Madison, contrasts us with the tyrannical governments of Europe who are, quote, afraid to trust the people with arms. Joseph Story, in his commentaries on the Constitution in 1833, quote, the right of the citizens to keep and bear arms has justly been considered as the palladium of the liberties of a republic, since it offers a strong moral check against the usurpation and arbitrary power of rulers, and will generally, even if these are successful in the first instance, enable the people to resist and triumph over them. We have a Second Amendment because we understand in this country that there are some things, inalienable rights, that you cannot justly take away from a free and equal human being. Tyrants disarm the people they intend to oppress.
This is insanity. Who gets to decide what is an overly intrusive government? So my advice to journalists, there's some simple questions that you should be asking of Republicans. They have to articulate now what they truly believe. You have a responsibility when you sit down with Congressman Chip Roy, who's running for re-election, or Marjorie Taylor Greene, or the inferior Clay Higgins, or Steve Scalise from Louisiana, the Republican whip who was shot, almost died. He still supports the NRA. Ask them the following questions. Do you believe the Second Amendment was put in place by our founding fathers to give each individual American the right to defend themselves from laws that they don't think are fair? Do we have a Second Amendment so individuals in America can decide which laws they're going to obey and which laws they're not going to obey? That's the first question. Then ask, are we a Christian nation? Now, if they lie and say, no, we're a pluralistic society, they will be abandoning their base. Get them on record. Ask them, are we a Christian nation? Ask them, do you believe Muslims, Buddhists, and Jews are going to heaven? Ask them these questions. It is relevant. It is germane to the midterms. They are not willing to tell us what they really believe. And what they really believe is terrifying. This is why I'm a Democrat. As much as I loathe Pelosi and Biden and Chuck Schumer and all their children. I hate their children more. Those are the opportunistic infections. And brother Jimmy Biden, hate them. They are not as dangerous as these Republicans.